Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us once again for the Signal Innovation Showcase. I'm George Seifers, Editor-in-Chief of Signal Magazine, and we are about to hear from Lynn Fardella, Business Development Director for KDM Analytics. So Lynn, come on up to the podium.
Okay, that's good. I get the clap at the beginning just in case there isn't one at the end. Thank you. Hey, before I get going, I'm curious. So DevSecOps, is that something that everybody is involved in? Or is it a peripheral interest? Or, okay, so I'm talking to an educated audience. All right. So actually, let me do a quick introduction. So yes, business development. I do come with a fairly technical background, not necessarily in the DevOps or DevSecOps world, but fairly knowledgeable. So I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion at the end, assuming I have left enough time for you. I am with KDM Analytics, but I'm also here with our partner, Acquired Data Solutions. So we work with our U.S. partner, who then sort of sells into the U.S. government. So let's talk about what is an ever-changing cybersecurity place for you guys. You know, I like the tornado icon because it sort of captures, I think, what's happening in the cybersecurity area, and that is, you start with what's there, legacy systems that weren't really built with security or risk management in mind. You combine that with more and more complex systems and the requirements that go with them. So that's what you're starting with, and then you add to that the fact that the accelerating frequency and severity of cybersecurity attacks. Like, the adversaries out there are very sophisticated and they continue to get better at it. What's defending that? A pretty knowledgeable community, but the fact that it's sort of fragmented and there's a lack of efficiency in terms of how it works together. So you're immediately at a disadvantage. So you had this concept of DevOps, a really well thought out process in which development and operations, you create this continuous sort of feedback and process, and it worked well. And so when you look at, there are security issues, what should you do? Let's just bolt on security into what is a well-working and well-oiled machine. But when you do that, you need to think to the next line, which is, okay, what does that mean? What are the triggers and what do we do? So let's look at the DevSecOps stack. Again, if this is your world, it's well understood. Supply chain, platform, applications, operations, and eventually intelligence. And each of them has their own approaches, their own tools. And here's where you start to see some challenges, is that they're being dealt with individually. There's nothing, in most cases, there's nothing that links them all together. Each of them operates quite well on their own, but when you look at as a combination, there's a challenge there. And when you're an attacker, that creates opportunities. I gotta hit the right button. So here's what you look at. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff going on there when we start to look at DevSecOps and what it means. Introducing security doesn't solve all the problems. In fact, what it's done is it generates a lot of questions, which in itself is not a bad thing. But what it means is when you're looking at how you do all this, like how do you integrate security through everything? What threats are we addressing? Where are the gaps? There's a lot of questions. And that has driven a relook at how do we address this? And all these questions, if you look at all of them and you live in the risk assessment world, these are all the questions that risk assessment looks at and addresses. So the natural step is, how do you introduce risk management into DevSecOps? And that's what we look at. And that's reason why I'm up here talking, is traditional security, and as it extends to DevSecOps, doesn't really focus on mission risk. So when you look at the overall, there's a mission. Like everything that we're doing here is to support a mission. Risk assessment, risk management, that is its focus. It looks at what is the mission risk, and then looks all the way down. So essentially, goes all the way through the stack, and how is all of that, when we look at it in totality, how will it impact the mission? So the objective here is how do we take risk, and for any of you who are fans of Risk, the game, hope you recognize the cube. How do you build that into DevSecOps? Well, the first thing you can do is you can make a really cool icon. So that's what always we start with is, let's take the DevSecOps process and let's integrate risk into it. And what does that actually look like? And what it means is you start looking at, as I was hinting, it's mission-centric. So what I'm attempting to do with that picture there is go, risk is central. Risk assessment, that's central to everything you're doing. And then all of the other tactical activities in terms of the tools you use, the threats you're looking at, how you mitigate them, they're all being driven by how do we mitigate, how do we reduce risk to the mission. The actual execution, because this gets really complex very quickly, and we'll see that in a few minutes, is we use modeling and automation to take all the details and put them into a platform and put them into create a capability where you are, as you know, the DevSecOps person or a risk analyst are able to see that in its totality. However, it is messy. So this slide is supposed to deliver two messages. One, irrespective of the standards the risk assessment standards you use, and there's a broad range of them. There's a lot happening there, but what you want to do is you look at this, and it's derived from a diverse framework, diverse risk frameworks, and again, a large variety of them. But regardless of the framework you're using, you're approaching this with a zero trust mindset. So the same approach that's used when systems are deployed live, so in the real world, you take that same philosophy, and that's driven back into risk assessment and risk management in the development world. And what it creates is an approach that needs to be structured, systematic, and model-driven assessment so that it ensures you get maximum coverage. And a little later, I'm going to talk about this concept of assurance. And I'll give a little away right now is assurance is looking at the fact that you want to be comfortable. You want to be confident in making a statement that you've looked at all the risks. You've addressed all the threats, and you've applied all the mitigations to it. And in complex systems, that is hard to do without an automated approach. And when you think about in the DevSecOps world, where you're looking at it, your individual place, whether you're at the platform or the applications or the supply chain, you're comfortable making that statement for your area of expertise. But at some point, somebody needs to be able to make that statement for the entire stack, for the entire system, for the entire mission. And that's what we get into as we start getting a little deeper. So the challenge here and the fun, so now we're starting to get into the fun part. Yeah, I know I'm a little masochistic when I say that, is how do you correlate mission impacts and attacks to what you're looking at? Because it's complex. I've captured just what we look at. What are the areas of focus for us? So what are mission impacts? So understanding what they are. The attack surface. Some of you will be quite familiar with what that means and what it looks like. The attack paths. In complex systems, the attack paths, they can be 10, 20,000 different attack paths that will impact a mission. When you think about a risk analyst or a human trying to look at all of that, trying to assess all of that, it quickly becomes something that's not doable. And again, when we talked about where the DevSecOps stack, your individual layer, you probably could manage that, or a team could manage that. When you look at a complex system and you look at how all of those interrelate, it becomes something that's not manageable. And then you look at the capabilities of the attackers. Something, again, I mentioned at the very beginning as part of the tornado, that's changing on a constant basis. It also changes on who the players are. The capabilities of a nation state versus a hacker versus hackers that are doing it for a business, very different. And that changes, the risk profile for a given system based on who might be the attacker. And who the attackers might be is going to change based on the theater of operations. We do work with Boeing, and for a given system or project, they might have hundreds of profiles, depending on where the system is going to be deployed, whatever it is, who's using it, and who are the potential attackers. Great variety. So in this slide, what I'm trying to capture here is what you're looking at. And and essentially the challenge you're looking at is it's very big data. So you look at the two axes. So on the one we have, I can barely see it on my screen, but is assessment coverage. So it starts at vulnerabilities. You start to looking at threats. You then look at the related risks. On the other axis, you're looking at, God, I get to see that. Thank you. You're looking at the code network, the architecture, and then the mission operation. They're giving you scale. And what the line there is sort of attempting to capture is your ability and your confidence level in that you're capturing all the risks. And it's, again, like any true good 2x2 matrix, it's the upper right-hand corner, that's nirvana. So when you're there, you now have a high level of confidence that you are, and I mentioned this term earlier, system assurance, you are comfortable that you have picked up all the risks. You understand the attacks, you understand the mitigations, and you can talk to those and you know you're addressing them. The big data statement there is when you're looking at this, by the time you're looking at that upper right-hand corner, the amount of information you're looking at is large. It is a traditional big data problem. And as I mentioned earlier, you're talking about reasonably complex systems, 10, 20,000 different attack paths, which in turn have different mitigations, which in turn have different attackers. When you look at that, and it becomes something for a human that I'm going to say is insurmountable, to be able to say they've assessed it and their assurance level is that they're comfortable, they're addressing it all. And this is where the automation and AI applications come in. So we're looking at engineering, risk, and assurance. So engineering teams often engineering teams, security assurance teams, the risk managers, they work separately. So we're back to this silo approach, which I think is a traditional theme in terms of the number of discussions I've had with other people. Silos seem to be the one thing that everybody understands, regardless of where you are, what industry or private sector. No difference in the risk world. So what we're looking to accomplish here is, we're arguing for tighter integration across these domains. And you achieve that by bringing them together, providing them a system, a tool, or approach that allows them to work together. So going back to the original DevSecOps, that was the first approach to, okay, all these processes need to work together. How do we do that? Then realizing the problem is really big. it's much more outsized than traditional DevSecOps can handle. So this approach allows them to be all brought together, and then the analysis to also be brought into it. So I got a slide translation, which I'll get rid of. So this is now going back to model-based system engineering, which is the core to a lot of what we're doing. I'm guessing some of you are probably familiar with it as well. And it's evolution from, again, a documents-based approach which does not scale to something that is digitized. And in our world, it talks about these digital threads. And again, some of you may have heard that before, where there's a digital thread that goes from a mission impact all the way down to potentially a supply chain issue, or a bomb issue, or an application vulnerability issue. So it follows out all. And it's only by digitizing that you can do that analysis, that you can scale appropriately. Without that, paper-based, human-based, does not work. So here's where it sort of gets interesting. So from the concept of an attack tree, where we can track vulnerabilities and essentially attack paths. We use a tree because we follow it all the way up to where it has an impact on the mission. So now this is where you're starting to see, again, humans like graphics, a graphical representation of how you get there. But more importantly, with the tools and these approaches, how you can select mitigations to address those. And again, your suite of mitigations is huge, but this allows you to select the ones that you need to use. So again, limited resources, limited time, limited funding. This allows you to select the ones that give you the biggest bang for the buck and address them. And that's this concept of total digital risk assessment. And what I really want to point out here is we've digitized the whole world of risk assessment. It's now enabling you to take advantage of essentially what is this big data. And that's why we have this idea of a data lake there. Because what happens is you're moving the information that you collect. So all that information we collect, all those approaches, again, going back to the original stack, the tools, the information they collect, the mitigations, the approaches to risk, even when the system's live, because this is a process that doesn't stop once it's deployed. So the analysis tools, once a system is live, you can take that input and feed it back into the system design, because systems are always being upgraded, they're being updated. You can take that information and it goes into effectively a data lake. And that's why we mentioned this concept of AI. AI is always based on big data. This is what you're creating in this, the DevSecOps world now, is you have access to a tremendous amount of data. You have the tools available to you to analyze that data, and then to apply that to your risk mitigation approaches, understanding how it impacts mission risk, and making the system design changes, or introducing the mitigations that will allow you to essentially retain the system as it's designed, but just add, again, different processes, different approaches, whatever, to essentially achieve the the mission risk you want to have. That takes me to the end. My name is Len Fardella. Steve Seiden here, who is the president of Acquired Data Solutions, and our partner who invited us down here is also here if you have questions. And I guess I have a minute or two for questions if anybody has one. Go ahead. I guess they want, oh. That's so everybody can hear you.
Hi. I'll preface this with, I really don't know what I'm talking about. Okay?
I didn't either, but how did it look?
It looked fine. I've been increasingly concerned over, and I wrote down a couple of keywords here, agentic AI, and the growing platform of no-code, low-code applications such as N8N, which is absolutely amazing as far as autonomous goal-seeking programs and their ability to create links and other things without interaction with anyone. And I suspect there are a lot of security implications in that, given the power of some of these things. I just wonder, have you guys run across anything like that, thought about stuff like that, are working with things like that? These are absolutely incredible programs that you give them a goal, and then they'll figure out through the interconnections how to get there.
So
Thanks.
essentially, you're talking about an attacker on steroids to a degree who's probing. They're relying on typically known vulnerabilities, or they're probing and trying to understand new vulnerabilities, and that is sort of captured here in the concept of an attack path, because an attack path often will leverage the fact, here's a known vulnerability. In itself, it can be mitigated, but when you start to combine it with other vulnerabilities, you create sort of that ability to worm your way through and actually have a mission impact. It sounds like what you're talking about is an automated approach or tool, attack tool, that's designed to take advantage of that. So this, in a way, is a sense, because it's using AI on the defending side to anticipate and to essentially mitigate what what you were talking to. That's my best guess. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Lynn, thank you so much. That was great. Thank you all once again for being here. Our next presentation will be at 2:50 on AI service delivery and customer experience with DISA. So please come back for that one. Thank you.